Okay, we are live. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Law Entrance YouTube channel. There was some technical glitch, that's a few minutes of delay, but we are back with the class, with the session. Welcome back to the session, everyone. Today is 23rd of December. Let me quickly share my presentation with you, and when we begin with the class. All right. ठीक है. So, the agenda for today's session is we'll be looking at a few of the articles. Firstly, we'll have a brief overview of the newspaper, of course, and then we'll discuss a few articles, three articles in detail, which would include a couple of editorial articles and one miscellaneous article. So, that is the plan for the day. Now, today is 23rd of December, which means that we are in the last week of 2024. And what does that tell you? That tells you that this year is coming to an end and it is time to set new goals for the next year for 2025 so that you can destine yourself towards success, be it for CLAT 2026 or ALET 2026, or if you are reappearing for each of these exams. So what I would request you guys is today go back home in the evening or in the night whenever you find some free time. Try to visualize your month by month journey in the next year, where you can make a rough, not an exact plan, but a rough plan as to how you would go about your preparation in the next coming year. What are the major events which are going to come? It could be your exams, it could be a wedding, it could be a vacation, it could be anything. But take that into consideration and plan your year in such a way that your preparation is not affected. Understand how and when and where will you allocate time for each of the subjects, be it GK, be it legal, be it English, be it your quant, or be it your LR, right? So this is important because without having a structured plan, without having a structured roadmap for preparation, it would be a little tough. Now, another important thing to note here is Amiten sir recently took a session on how to plan your journey for CLAT 2026. I hope you all watched that session. If you did not, please do watch that session. It's available on our YouTube channel, which would give you a lot of clarity as to how you can proceed with the roadmap for the next year, right? So that is what I wanted to tell you guys. Pranshi is here, Gyanendra is here, Hari is here, Konark is here, Priyanshi. Okay. Okay, welcome to the class, guys. So we'll have a quick overview of the newspaper like always, and then we'll talk about a few of the topics in a little bit of detail. We might also discuss a few smaller topics while we take the overview. So let's begin today's analysis session. Also, please try to invite more of your friends to the analysis session, because the more participative it is, the more debates we have in the session, the more discussion we have in a two-way manner, the more engaging it would become for you as well as for me. And I would be able to engage you guys in multiple other ways, like in formats of quizzes, like in formats of MCQ based questions, which would only be fruitful when we have at least 15 students coming live to the class. So if you have friends who are preparing for the exams, please invite them to the 3 p.m. Hindu analysis session. Tell them to participate, and that would be mutually beneficial for them, for you, for me, for all of us. So it's a win-win situation. Now, beginning with our discussion of the Hindu newspaper for 23rd of December, the homepage, not the homepage, the first page of the newspaper says that half of Manrega's sites inspected in Bengal showed flaws. So we'll talk about this topic in a little bit of detail. But what this essentially means is, what is Manrega? Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Generation Scheme, correct? So this is a scheme which is targeted towards rural India in order to provide them 100 days of labor for which they can be paid. Basically an employment scheme, an employment support scheme for rural India, correct? If these people are not provided the 100 days of work, they are provided compensation in exchange of that work. So that is the rough idea about the Manrega scheme, which is applicable across India. But in Bengal, there are some, let's say, flaws which have been coming to light in response to a RTI. What is an RTI? RTI is an application which stands for Right to Information. So if you want to request from a government body, from a government commission or whatever, any information, any data related to any scheme, related to any policy, related to any government decision, you can file an RTI and you would get a response for that in form of an RTI reply. So this RTI reply says that half of Manrega's site inspected in Bengal showed flaws. Now, what are these flaws? There are multiple flaws. Flaws related to corruption, flaws related to the benefit not reaching the actual beneficiaries, flaws related to deletion of these people from the roles of Manrega. Multiple flaws. When you read the article, you'll get to understand. So, what that caused is the central government said that because there are so many flaws, loopholes in the Manrega implementation in West Bengal, we are going to stop our end of the funding of this particular scheme till these flaws are resolved, which created a little bit of uproar, a little bit of tussle between the state government of West Bengal and the central government. And then the West Bengal government said that leave Manrega, we'll start our own employment generation scheme. So they sort of did not cooperate with the Manrega scheme, to put it bluntly. But the center says that they are not cooperating, and that is why we are stopping these funds. Now, the pertinent issue here is are these flaws, are these loopholes only present in West Bengal, or is there a political agenda? Is there a political undernote to this? Is there a, let's say, different perspective to look at it? Is what you have to look at, correct? Now, when you read this article, this would give you a lot of stats. It says that it will be 3 years since Center sent the last tranche of funds under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Correct? So, the last funds which were sent by Center to the state government was 3 years ago. Now, why is the central government sending funds for this particular scheme? Because this is a centrally sponsored scheme. Now, there are two types of schemes. One is a central sector scheme, and the second is a centrally sponsored scheme. I'll repeat: central sector scheme and centrally sponsored scheme. Now, when you talk about a central sector scheme, 100% of the funding is given by the central government. For example, currently the ruling party, the ruling government, not the party, the government. Whereas when you talk about a central sponsored scheme, there the funding is distributed between the central government and the state government in a ratio which they decide. Could be 50-50, it could be 70-30, it could be 80-20, based on what the scheme is. So this article is telling you that the center has been citing irregularities in implementation of the program in the state. As per the RTI replies, factors promoting the Union Rural Development Ministry's decision was inspection of 63 work sites, out of which inconsistencies were reported in 31. There were 3.4 crore registered workers in Bengal. The center bears 90% of the budget for the scheme that provides guaranteed employment for 100 days, which I was just telling you, right? Series of RTI requests from this campaign told that center took 3 field visits in these places, and they were found satisfactory, and the remaining 31 had serious shortcomings. The team broadly reported these faults with implementation, breaking bigger works into smaller parcels to avoid scrutiny. Existing work was fraudulently shown to be created. So there was no work which was happening, but work was fraudulently shown in order to claim that money. Tendering norms were not followed for procurement of systems, work not permissible under Manrega were taken up, poor maintenance of files and records. So there were inconsistencies, there were flaws in the implementation. And that is why Center stopped its funding. So that is all about this particular article. It was interesting to discuss. It was important to discuss because this scheme often stays in news, the Manrega scheme, because it concerns rural India. Now, talking about another important highlight article on the first page is India Kuwait elevate ties to strategic partnership, which means that they have increased their cooperation in fields like defense, in fields like supply of military equipment, which is mentioned in the newspaper. Kuwait is an important country in the Middle East. It's, I guess, the sixth largest country, not the sixth largest country, the sixth largest reserves of crude oil are present in Kuwait. So basically, their major source of income, major source of revenue is oil, crude oil, and exporting crude oil. India also imports crude oil from Kuwait, and India also has a diasporic connection with Kuwait. What do I mean by diasporic connection? That a lot of Indians work in Kuwait. A lot of people of Indian origin work in Kuwait. So Kuwait is an important country from multiple point of views. One, from the import-export crude oil point of view. Second, from the Middle Eastern strategy point of view, diplomacy point of view. Thirdly, from a defense and military equipment point of view. Fourth, from a trade route point of view, because it's located at such a geography which is very close to important sea trade routes, right? So that is why this particular cooperation agreement, this particular MOU, which is called a Memorandum of Understanding, becomes very important. So you can see Prime Minister Modi with the Kuwaiti Amir, and what is he receiving? He is receiving the highest honor, which is given to head of states by Kuwait, which is called the this mentioned here. Let me just read it out for you so that I don't mispronounce it. कहाँ गया award? यहीं पे था, ऑर्डर ऑफ समथिंग करके. Okay, can't seem to find it. Let me just quickly breeze through the article to see where it is written. Can you guys spot it? Okay, I'll just Google it. There was order of something. Uh, Order of Mubarak Al Kabir. Okay, so I'll write it down for you. Order of Mubarak Al Kabir. Right. Let me put it in the chat box. Okay, Hari has already written it. Order of Mubarak Al Kabir. That is the name. Highest order, highest award which is given to head of states. इससे पहले this has been given to head of states like Prince Charles, like Bill Clinton, and such. So quite a big honor for Modi ji to receive this particular prize. उसके अलावा there were strategic partnerships formed in terms of energy, in terms of defense cooperation, in terms of joint military exercises, in terms of military equipment supply. All of these things happened between India and Kuwait, right? So this is something which we wanted to discuss in detail as well, but we have discussed this more or less in the article itself, which is okay. Union government should overhaul GST, says Congress. So why is this coming to question? I don't know how many of you followed the news of the GST Council revising rates on GST on popcorn. So it's quite funny to say. I mean, there are so many important things on which you are considering the revision of GST, such as health insurance, such as other critical services, so that such as health services. But you are deferring those decisions time and again. You are postponing them to decide on them later. And what are you deciding on? What is the GST Council deciding on? How much GST should be on salted popcorn? How much GST should be on sweet popcorn? How much GST should be on unprocessed popcorn or non-packaged popcorn? They are giving multiple slabs for how popcorn should be taxed under GST in the different rates, which ironically defeats the purpose of GST. The purpose of GST was to give a uniform shape to the taxation system, make it more streamlined, make it more structured, rather than making it more complex. Now, when you are saying that salted popcorn पे इतना परसेंट जीएसटी लगेगा, स्वीट पॉपकॉर्न बिकॉज वो कन्फेक्शनरी बन जाता है तो उस पर ज़्यादा जीएसटी लगेगा, एंड सॉल्टेड पॉपकॉर्न बिकॉज वो नमकीन बन जाता है तो उस पर इतना जीएसटी लगेगा, एंड जो नॉर्मल पॉपकॉर्न है उस पर इतना जीएसटी लगेगा. दिस कॉम्प्लिकेटिंग थिंग्स which I don't understand why, but I'm no one to comment on that. So yeah, GST Council की अभी मीटिंग हुई थी recently, जैसलमेर में हुई थी, I think 55th. It was the GST Council meeting. GST Council is a constitutional body made by a Constitutional Amendment Act. Which Constitutional Amendment Act brought in the GST? Can you guys tell me in the chat box? अभी recently हमने discuss किया था कि GST was brought into place through a constitutional amendment. Do you guys know which constitutional amendment are we talking about? We're talking about the 101st constitutional amendment through which GST came into being. Constitutional amendment. Okay. So through this amendment, GST, goods and service tax, came into being in 2017, and GST Council को head कौन करता है अगर आपसे पूछा जाए तो that is Union Finance Minister, which is निर्मला सीतारमन जी. उसके अलावा इसमें और भी elected members होते हैं from states. Every state elects their representative, and there is also the Union Minister of State for Finance. So these are the two key people in this particular GST Council, headed by the Finance Minister. ठीक है, चलो मूविंग ऑन. Registration for 1,002 women to begin today. This is city based news, not important for us, so we'll skip through this. BJP's 10-year Tripura report card, not important. Moving on, moving on, moving on. Nothing important here. All state based news. Okay. We're down to the editorial section, which is important. This editorial article will discuss in detail the global warming fight has a challenge for India. Now, what is India's deadline for net zero carbon emissions? Does anyone of you know? India's deadline for net zero carbon emissions. Which year have we set as the deadline by which we will achieve net zero carbon emissions? So this is in context with the COP29 summit, which happened recently in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan की capital बाकू में हुई थी COP29 summit, where India also participated. And वहाँ पे काफी ज़्यादा discussion हुआ था over climate change, over global warming, over things like carbon credit, things like carbon trading, all of those things जो हर बार ही होता है. बट अगेन एक बार हमने हिंदू एनालिसिस में एक कॉन्सेप्ट डिस्कस किया था विच वाज कॉल्ड सीबैम. सीबैम इज कार्बन बॉर्डर एडजस्टमेंट मैकेनिज्म which is going to be implemented by European Union. Now, what exactly is CBAM? चलो उस पर मैं आपको सारा बताऊंगा when we talk about this in detail. This article is basically telling us about the challenges which India might face in moving towards net zero carbon emission. ठीक है. Simultaneous election idea is a non-starter. We have talked about this one nation, one election. We have talked about the pros and cons of this multiple times. So let's not really spend time on this. No easy solution to the travails of Indian workers abroad. Not that important for us. Pointing the beacon at India's undersea warfare power. This is important from a competitive perspective. Recently, we developed multiple submarines and multiple ship vessels which are capable of nuclear warfare. SSBN, जिनको बोलते हैं हम. Submarines which are capable of launching nuclear powered ballistic missiles, right? The recent one was INS Arighat, which we added to our arsenal in August, I think, August 2024. Usse pehle there was INS Arihant as well. And yeah, that is what this article is telling you about. The project under which we are building all of these is called Project 77. पहले Project 75 था. Then उसके बाद हमने इसको Project 77 में evolve कर दिया. Where we are building multiple such submarines. Total पहले हमें 12 बनानी थी. उसके बाद हम फोकस कर रहे हैं पहले 6 बनाए एंड इसमें भी वी आर फोकसिंग मोर ऑन मेकिंग देम इंडिजिनसली यानी कि नॉट जस्ट इम्पोर्टिंग द सबमरीन्स बट इम्पोर्टिंग let's say the technology, the raw material, and building them in India, and then maybe in the future moving on to completely 100% indigenously building the submarines in India. So that is what this article is talking about: pivotal developments, conventional submarines, what are the hurdles. So we'll talk a little bit about this article as well. Then there is an interesting article on challenges of posthumous reproduction. Posthumous means after a death of the person. 2070 is the correct answer for the goal. Posthumous means after a person has expired, and reproduction you all know. So this is talking about whether this should be allowed or not allowed, whether you are allowed to store the reproductive, let's say, material of a person and then allow a person to reproduce even after he has passed away. So, quite an interesting development. Let's see how law evolves. So, this is regarding a case which came to Delhi High Court. Let me read a little bit about this. The Delhi High Court allowed the parents of a dead man to use his frozen semen for posthumous reproduction. The young unmarried man had preserved his semen sample at a hospital in Delhi while undergoing chemotherapy. He passed away in September 2020 when his parents, his legal heirs, approached the hospital requesting the sample to be released. The hospital declined, citing the need for appropriate orders from High Court. Parents filed a petition with High Court. Hospital countered that no laws, including the Assisted Reproductive Technology Act, govern the release of frozen semen samples of an unmarried deceased male to his parents or legal heirs. The court also noted that neither the ART Act nor its rules deal with such a situation. In this order, court cited a similar case of 2018 where the parents of an unmarried man who died in Germany used his cryopreserved semen to have grandchildren. Cryopreserved means in a cold storage. Cryo means cold. like below freezing point. After his death, the semen was shipped to India and used to conceive two children through a surrogate and egg donor. What are the existing laws on this? Basically, there are no laws on this. With advances in reproductive technology, cryopreservation of gametes, which is the reproductive cells of males and females, is possible outside the body for long periods, but using cryopreserved gametes for posthumous conception raises complex ethical, social, and regulatory issues. So this is what this article is saying, that the ART Act does not really have things which are addressing posthumous reproduction. It's addressing fertility, infertility, gamete donation, surrogacy, but neither addresses the current case. So this is a legal challenge where we don't have any clear guidelines, and that is what this article is saying in multiple different perspectives, and how precedents have been followed, how cases have been decided. The court considered international legal precedents like Dudeword versus Spence and Earworth versus North Bristol while addressing generic material. These lawsuits have explored the ownership of biological material and rights of individuals to control it after death. So let's see if we get any guidelines or laws related to posthumous reproduction. It would be interesting to see. But that is what they are debating, that it is important to assess whose rights are at stake here. The court emphasized that since science has made it possible for infertile couples to conceive, parents' desire to carry on their deceased son's legacy through his cryopreserved semen cannot be defeated. This raises more questions than answers regarding its ethical and legal ramifications. In the absence of guidelines, it becomes imperative to revisit existing laws and address gaps instead of relying on interpretations of status of posthumous conception. So yeah, that's the article. I think it's self-explanatory. इसमें कुछ ज़्यादा बताने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Worst to best, fiscal evolution of Odisha in the last 2 decades. Fiscal means related to economy. Higher non-tax revenue stemmed from increased revenues from mining leases where premiums were tied to market prices rather than extraction volumes. So that's good. Odisha is gaining good revenues from its mining avenues, and the fiscal evolution is happening in a good way. All right, nothing important to note here because all of these are just numbers which won't be asked. So we'll just move past it. Are Manipur militants using Starlink devices? Starlink is what? Starlink is a technology, a satellite internet based technology developed by the SpaceX CEO, the Tesla CEO, Elon Musk buys up, and it has started in multiple countries. It is going to come to India as well. So people are questioning that are Manipur militants using Starlink devices क्योंकि वहाँ पे काफी ज़्यादा जो है government regulation is quite stringent, and still militants are able to coordinate and network with each other. So there might be a possibility of them using a satellite network. Let's read the gist of this. The Spear Corps of the Indian Army on December 16 shared photos of Elon Musk owned X of guns, ammunition, and country-made mortars that army and police had seized in Manipur. X users, X essentially means Twitters. Twitter users spotted a small satellite device and router, with the latter bearing the SpaceX logo. India strictly regulates and restricts the use of satellite-based communication devices, even by Indian civilians and citizens in conflict-free zones. International borders are not solid. It is not easy to refine satellite internet coverage to such a precise degree that service is activated or halted exactly in line with the nation's border. So it's tough to control the usage of Starlink network that precisely. And as mentioned, India has very strict guidelines कि आप satellite based, अगर आपको phone भी use करना है ना, satellite based phone जो होता है जिससे you can communicate without a cellular network, उसके लिए भी आपको special permissions लेनी पड़ती है to own that sort of phone. I'm not talking about walkie talkies and stuff. I'm talking about actual satellite phones. So very strict regulations based on that. And if these militants are using such Starlink networks, then they might be prosecuted for that. Because what does the Indian law state? It regulates and restricts the use of state-based communication devices. Everyday gadget users within the country would have noticed that even key satellite emergency features on premium phones that are easily available for users overseas are not enabled for use in India. So जैसे अभी आई डोंट नो हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू आर अवेयर, बट जैसे रिसेंट जो iOS ने लॉन्च किया था ना, एप्पल डिवाइस अपना एप्पल ने अपना जो लॉन्च किया था आईफोन डिवाइस, उसमें उन्होंने एक सैटेलाइट बेस्ड इमरजेंसी सर्विस एक्टिवेट करी थी वेयर यू कुड कॉल फॉर इमरजेंसी हेल्प इवन इफ यू डोंट हैव नेटवर्क ऑन योर फोन. सो Your phone would connect to the nearest satellite and would communicate your location to help authorities. But that is not available in India as of now because the laws do not permit it. Under Section 6 of the Indian Wireless Act and Section 20 of Indian Telegraph Act, use of Iridium satellite phones or Thuraya satellite phones is illegal in the country. These restrictions are in place to combat militancy and terrorism. So there's a reason why they are not allowed, because we have threats of terrorism on both ends of our border. So, okay, let's see if there is anything else left. This is what are the new interception rules and safeguards for telecommunication. So, this is similar to that only. Um, Principle behind working of a speed gun used for motion tracking. Not important for us. Arrest of terror suspects in Bengal triggers political row. State-based news, not that important. NCMP to join protests, not important. 1 in 3 women get urinary tract infection before turning 25, say doctors, which is quite unfortunate. Hmm. Okay. 40 years on displaced Maharashtra villagers. Okay. Anything noteworthy from a competitive point of view can't be seen here. India cannot be intimidated to conform, says Jaishankar. Minister says India will do what is right in national interest and for global good and will not permit others to have a veto on its choices. Okay, interesting. Tiger from Simlipal in Odisha strays into West Bengal. Jammu and Kashmir CM cancels Jammu meetings as cold wave grips Kashmir Valley. So this is a phase, a particular winter phase in the Kashmir Valley. इसका एक particular नाम भी होता है, something Kalan करके, I think Chat Kalan, Chit Kalan, something like that. यहाँ पे mentioned होगा. Hmm, नहीं है mention. Wait, I'll just quickly tell you what it's called. Just give me one moment. Yeah, it's called Chilai Kalan. So Chilai Kalan is a phase which starts usually around 21st of December and lasts till the end of January, where the coldest period in the Jammu and Kashmir is witnessed, where temperatures usually drop below zero. So that phase has started, and उस वजह से जम्मू कश्मीर की मीटिंग्स कैंसिल हो गई हैं. बट हाँ, इतना ही पता होना चाहिए आपको, और ज़्यादा इसमें डिटेल में जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Then finance related articles. Anything important here? Not really. Israeli strikes land on school near hospital complex in Gaza, killing 28. This is the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict. Putin vows revenge as Ukraine strikes deep into Russia. So things are escalating on this front, Russia-Ukraine. Let's hope that peace is established. Finland PM calls Russia a permanent threat to European Union. Who's the PM? Petri Orpo. Okay. Syria's new leader meets Turkish diplomat, vows not to negatively interfere in Lebanon. Okay, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan meets Mohammad Al Jaloni in Damascus. Damascus is the capital of Syria on Sunday. So, who's the new leader? Mohammad Al Jalani, Ahmad Al Sharara. So, this guy is the new leader of Syria, the one on the right, and he has met the foreign minister of Turkey. US playing with fire, says China following latest aid for Taiwan. So इनका अलग conflict चल रहा है US China का on the Taiwan issue. US is favoring Taiwan. Germany pledges security inquest. Okay, anything on sports? Team India hits the nets with full intensity. Hmm, hmm, hmm. Okay. Okay, nothing noteworthy in the sports section. So that brings us to the end of our overview. Let's see if we want to discuss a couple of topics in detail, and then we'll put an end to the session. Yes, Chilai Kalan is the right answer. Thank you for helping out. So, India Kuwait, we have already discussed. We're going to discuss our issue of India and global warming to a little bit more detail. इंडस्ट्री वॉरफेयर भी हमने डिस्कस कर ही लिया मोर और लेस. सो इस पे थोड़ी सी बात कर लेते हैं इंडिया एंड ग्लोबल वार्मिंग पे. सो व्हाट इज दिस एडिटोरियल एसेंशियली टॉकिंग अबाउट? दिस इज टॉकिंग अबाउट mechanism called CBAM, which is carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now, I have explained this concept in earlier classes, but because you guys are a new batch, adjustment mechanism. So it's important to explain it to you as well. So what happens is whenever these COP summits, these climate meetings happen, the developed countries urge the developing countries to reduce their emissions, to reduce their usage of things like crude oil, coal, and non-renewable resources, and move towards renewable resources of energy. But what developing countries like India say that you guys are already developed, we are still in a developing stage, so we cannot rapidly shift towards renewable resources, and we cannot really compromise on our development as well, because that would really be unfair, as you guys have already done your share of emissions and now you are asking us to stop our share of emissions when we are on a developing stage. So that is one part of the conflict. The second part of the conflict is even when they cooperate on, let's say, some measures, let's say reducing carbon emissions, there is a conflict in terms of trade. So for example, let's say coal is used in production of commodity XYZ. Okay. Now, because developed countries have stringent measures against development using coal, they cannot really use coal that freely. So this development of XYZ, let's say, costs them rupees 2000. Hypothetical example. Okay. So it's costing them 2000 rupees to manufacture XYZ because they cannot really freely use coal because they have a lot of restrictions, them being developed countries. And what happens is they look at alternatives, that where can we import this particular XYZ item from a different country where the restrictions are lesser. So let's say there is India. India may climate restrictions are not that stringent as compared to, let's say, European country, let's call it France. Okay. So France को 2000 rupees लग रहे हैं to manufacture XYZ because of higher stringent measures to cut down on coal, whereas India is manufacturing the same thing in 1000 rupees because India can still use coal more freely as compared to France. So what France does is, what France के manufacturers and vendors do, they import it from India. Let's say India को 1000 rupees cost आ रही है, India ने France को दे दिया 1200 rupees. So French manufacturers, let's say French vendors got this thing for 1200 rupees. So if they are getting it for 1200 rupees from a foreign entity, from a foreign country, would the French retailers or would the French consumers buy it from their own manufacturers जहाँ पे cost 2000 rupees आ रही है? Absolutely not. So this would disincentivize their manufacturing industry, and this would take away business from the businesses which are settled in France, which are making it as per the norms in 2000 rupees, because other people are procuring it for just 1200 rupees. So to counter this whole situation, the European Union said that we would bring out a measure called carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is CBAM. That is, when you, let's say, when these countries would import or when the other country would export such goods, they would impose a adjustment mechanism tax, basically a duty, basically a tax, so that this thing which you are getting for 1200, now you would have to pay, let's say, 2200, which disincentivizes you to take it from other countries and buy it from European countries only. So then 2000 rupees में आप फ्रांस की कंट्री से फ्रांस के मैन्युफैक्चरर से ही लोगे rather than taking it for India in 2200. So that is basically the idea of establishing CBAM. Now this obviously is against the interest of India क्योंकि हमारे ट्रेड को अफेक्ट करेगा ये. And of course, the countries are also putting pressure on India to reduce their carbon emissions as well. So that is what this article essentially talks about, that India as a country has taken a little bit of relaxed, I would say relatively relaxed deadlines for achieving net zero carbon emission as compared to the developed countries, because we have a lot of development to do. We have to generate a lot of electricity to get to that development. We have to use coal based thermal power plants to generate half of our electricity, because or more than less than almost half of our electricity comes from thermal power plants, and renewable energy resources are not that easy to establish as well as maintain. They are expensive, be it your solar energy, be it your nuclear energy, be it your hydro energy. All of these are expensive alternatives to coal, which is still much cheaper. So that is what this article says, that uh, yeah, that India needs to follow a different approach, India needs to take a different stance, and India needs to counter this problem of CBAM, as well as reducing the cost of producing electricity through renewable energy. Another challenge which India faces here is that India wants to shift to renewable energy, but it takes a lot of finances, it takes a lot of technological advancement, technological research. And these advanced countries are also not willing to share their research, share their resources, share their finances, share their technologies with India. So India says कि आपको देखो पैसे भी नहीं देने हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी भी नहीं देनी है, बट हम पे रिस्ट्रिक्शंस लगानी है. आपने अपना डेवलपमेंट कर लिया, आपने अपना कार्बन एमिशन कर लिया, अब जब हम कर रहे हैं अपना डेवलपमेंट तो आपको दिक्कत हो रही है. तो दिस कैन नॉट वर्क आउट. सो दैट इज व्हाट is being discussed in this whole article as a gist. And you can read that particular article to understand it a little more better. ठीक है. मैंने टैब शेयर नहीं किया लग रहा है आप लोगों से. या आई मिस दैट. चलो मैं फिर से आपको बता देता हूँ. मैं आपको CBAM समझा रहा था, कार्बन बॉर्डर एडजस्टमेंट मैकेनिज्म, दैट वन कंट्री, आई थिंक मैंने बताई दी पूरी कहानी वैसे, बट फिर से मैं बता देता हूँ. लेट्स से देयर आर टू कंट्रीज, फ्रांस एंड इंडिया. France is making a certain commodity at 2000 rupees. India is making that commodity at 1000 rupees. Because France has stricter measures on coal usage, India has relaxed measures on coal usage. And that product XYZ uses coal to produce. So French people would be incentivized to take it from India in, let's say, 1200 rupees or 1300, whatever India charges, rather than taking it from their own local manufacturers who are charging them 2000 rupees. Basically जो इंडिया में होता है, इंडिया में हम इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स और ये सारी चीजें चाइना से क्यों मंगाते हैं? क्योंकि सस्ती पड़ती है ना. इंडिया में मैन्युफैक्चर करना महंगा पड़ता है. सेम लॉजिक इज विद यूरोपियन कंट्रीज, दैट डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज से उनको चीजें सस्ते में मिल जा रही क्योंकि वहां पे उतने कार्बन रिलेटेड रेगुलेशंस नहीं है. सो उसी चीज को नेगेट करने के लिए दे मेड दिस CBAM, कार्बन बॉर्डर एडजस्टमेंट मैकेनिज्म, कि अब आपको अगर बाहर से मंगाना है तो आपको महंगा पड़ेगा, एंड इंडिया को जो है ज्यादा कॉस्ट बेयर करनी पड़ेगी, इंडिया को और सस्ते में देना पड़ेगा. तो उस वजह से इंडिया का नुकसान होगा. दैट इज व्हाई इंडिया इज अपोज्ड टू इट. दैट इज व्हाट CBAM is. Okay. So adjusting this border disparity between developing countries and developed countries, that is what European Union is proposing. ठीक है जी. चलो. All right. That is all from this particular newspaper analysis, I believe. Yeah. This was the last article which we have to discuss. Okay. Undersea warfare हम discuss कर चुके हैं कि we are developing submarines which are SSBNs, ballistic nuclear capable submarines, and INS Arighat is the latest addition to that pivotal developments में. On conventional submarines ये पूरा development दिया है कि how we started the project 75 where we had to build these submarines in cooperation with other countries, and then slowly moving gradually towards indigenous submarines, and what are some of the hurdles. So you can read this interesting article. Just we have covered. So that brings us to the end of today's Hindu analysis session. Now, from the upcoming sessions, I would request you guys to invite at least a couple of your friends, at least 3-4 of your friends, so that we can also dive deeper into the topics. ऐसे सिर्फ 8-10 लोग आते हैं तो बहुत ज्यादा फिर इंफॉर्मेशन हेवी हो जाए, एंड देन फिर बाद में मुझे रेफर करना पड़े टू प्रीवियस सेशंस, तो वो भी मुझे सही नहीं लगता. सो आई वुड love to dive deeper into topics. I would love to talk in detail about topics, but I would need more participation from your end. So बस यही है, रिक्वेस्ट ही आप लोगों से कि और लोगों को लेके आओ सेशन में, and then we can plan more things with the Hindu analysis session. ठीक है. चलो, that's all from my side, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Keep learning. Keep preparing. That's all for today. And signing off.